NFC, or need for recognition, is a key concept in the ELM theory, which is a personality trait used to understand how people process and respond to persuasive messages. People with high NFC enjoy cognitive activity and find satisfaction in abstract thinking, and low NFC people less enthusiasm for deep thinking and tend to avoid intense reflection. So compared with the previous discussion about the filter bubble, an individual with a low NFC would not be as aware of the filter bubble we are living in, and the one with high NFC will recognize the dangers and try to break out of them. In the realm of social media, we can use example where a person with high NFC would utilize these platforms for debates, discussions, and content that challenges them, and whereas someone with low NFC would use them more for entertainment and social interaction. Basically, high NFC individuals tend to seek out and enjoy real-life decision-making, while low NFC prefers simpler, more surface-level processing.
One aspect of the ELM, or elaboration likelihood model, that the rating discusses is the involvement aspect. And this essentially states that when people are more involved or an issue relates to them, they're more likely to pay attention and be active in the discussion and the process of persuasion. This plays along with what we learned in the lecture last week about persuasion, is that people are more likely to pay attention to things that they agree with, and more likely to listen and hold stronger to the beliefs that they already have, or something that is greatly going to affect them.
Okay, so talking about peripheral processing, which is described as the communicator's paradise, and I'm obviously talking about those who want to influence the other individuals. My mind linked to different theories and thoughts we have, for example, discussed the last week. And particularly in this part and in the text too, it clearly explicits that individuals and people who are listening to someone who is trying to influence them, they're not simply for a persuader's ploys. And I'm making reference to people who are motivated and able to process messages, and it reminds me of the message factors, for example, source credibility or explicitness of the conclusion or other of the arguments. And actually, as the text says, in this situation, persuasion flows through the central root. So we're moving to a higher level of communication.
Our motivation to process the information that we receive depends on our involvement. So when we're highly involved on an issue, it's usually because this issue affects to our personal lives, affects us directly. But the opposite happens when we are not that involved. So when we are highly involved, we process the message, we process the information through the central root, meaning that we pay a lot more attention to the message, we focus a lot more, and we analyze it carefully because it affects us directly. But when we are not that involved, we use the peripheral root. The argument quality is important here because when we are highly involved, we use the central root and we pay a lot of attention to the quality of the arguments that the communicator is using. But when we are not that involved, we rather pay attention to other things, such as, for example, if the communicator is an expert or not, because we are not going to focus on the message itself.
Online advertising is an important way of persuasion, and it is also related with our presentation last week and the book we had to read. Since once online webs know you and have a little bit of information about your likes, and based on the things you usually search in internet, online ads will be personalized to persuade the customer and make them decide to buy based on what appears on their screen. When buying, the ads know perfectly well what arguments they have to use to persuade, and the book also mentions the influence of motivation when persuading. For example, when people lack motivation or ability, they will make purchasing decisions based on a series of heuristics and peripheral signals. In some cases, this makes them an easy prey for unscrupulous online persuaders.